introduce someone who I have so much respect for. Dr. Fredricka Gilje has been concerned about mental health issues and issues with the elderly for her entire career. She was a Fulbright scholar and got to go to Sweden, is that right? To study for a year, where she made contacts with colleagues and researchers that she has continued until now. She taught at the University of North Dakota, she taught at Montana State University, she taught at the University of Alaska, and probably other places that I don't know about. But through all of that, maintained a nursing research agenda as well that focused on elder care issues and mental health issues. She's now officially retired, but comes back to help us at the College of Nursing with a variety of things and maintains her, her program of research with her Scandinavian colleagues. So with that, I'm going to have Fredricka take over, Dr. Fredricka Gilje, to talk about depression in the elderly, imagining the possibilities for living well.
Jane, am I connected here? There you go. Can you hear me? Is that clear? Okay, thank you so much, Jane, for those kind words, a little bit of my background. And thank you to the committee who organized this tremendous conference on this important topic. And welcome to all of you who are here in the room, my nursing colleagues here, as well as those at a distance. I'm really honored as well as humbled to come before you today to present on the topic of depression in the elderly, imagining the possibilities for living well. I want you to just think about what you've probably learned so far, because we've already been having presentations on some of the aspects of living well with chronic illness. We've heard about dementia, diabetes, pulmonary illnesses, some pain, cardiovascular conditions. So you see that this topic is very complex and very perplexing also. And I'm just going to add to it, to another topic of depression, which kind of overlays all of the other chronic conditions that you've heard about today. Okay. The focus here of my presentation will be kind of on the following topics. First of all, who are the elderly? And what is it like to care for those who are depressed and elderly? What are some of the causes, the manifestations, which are very multidimensional? And what are some possibilities for living well? And I hope that I can expand your imagination in looking at the possibilities that are out there. I also will introduce some resources. I have indicated on the slide some references that you can go to learn further about the various perspectives that I plan to present today. And then I will also inform you of a few trends that seem to be going on as we move into the future and the challenges that are before us in dealing with depression in the elderly. First of all, who are the elderly and what are the demographics of this population? I'd like to just refer you and reflect back on last year's presentation at this conference by Dr. William Thomas. He is the creator of the greenhouse approach, the Eden alternative, which some of you might be familiar with. But he has a website called Changing Aging Blog. Dr. Thomas is quite a visionary, and so I would encourage you to go to that site. He has a multitude of topics, a multitude of approaches and images that he presents in terms of aging. And of interest to me was from last year's that he presented the elderhood to refer to our elderly, saying that childhood, adulthood, and then elderhood is what occurs. And I kind of like sometimes having a new language. It helps us to look at things perhaps in new ways. But who are these elderly? Well, in the United States, there are 78 million people who are over the age of 65, and it's the largest demographic in our country. 13% of our population is over the age of 65. 7,000 people each day reach the age of 65 in the United States. Closer to home in Montana, the projections are by 2015, that's not very far away, we'll be fourth in the nation in the percent of seniors living in Montana. This is quite a staggering concern, and with the growing numbers of these elderly persons in Montana and the numbers of persons entering elderhood every day, we are really challenged to explore the possibilities for them to live well with many chronic conditions, including depression. Another staggering thought is from the World Health Organization. By 2010, depression will be the most prevalent illness in the world. By 2010. Excuse me, by 20, I think that should be 2020. There's a typo there. By 20, yeah.
Can I just borrow this real quick?
Sure.
You can go ahead.
Okay. I think that this is quite staggering. But when we look at the movement of human beings in the world due to famine, natural disasters, war, and various conflict, there's been greater movement on the face of the earth in the last 15, 20 years than ever before in the history of humankind. So people have been uprooted. They've had to change and had many transitions. I would suggest that you go to the World Health Organization website and you can access many of the conferences they've had in the last 10 years that have focused on this issue of depression becoming the most prevalent illness in the world. Here in the United States, we can see the prevalence reflected in several reports. One of them is the Mental Health Brief, which addresses depression as a priority action in our country. And another is the document Healthy People 210, looking at leading health indicators, and depression is a leading health indicator. We have 6.5 million people over the age of 65, which we project or somehow calculate are depressed. This number and this figure varies depending on what site you're looking at, and if you're looking at people over 55 or 60 or 65, you'll find that the statistics vary. But it's important then, as we look at these statistics, and think about the catastrophic form that it could take on human lives. Depression can be catastrophic. It can be fatal. It can be terminal. And so it's important that we focus on possibilities for living well rather than living unwell with depression in the elderly. We know that depression in the elderly mainly affects those with chronic illnesses and cognitive impairment. For example, with Alzheimer's, it's very common. And it often precipitates institutionalization, and institutionalization leads to a cost factor to our healthcare system. We also know that negative life stressors further increase the susceptibility to depression. And in our previous presentations, we've heard about role changes, role transitions, losses, many things that happen in the lives of the elderly that can be perceived as negative life changes. However, we should not view depression as a part of normal aging. It is a treatable condition, and of concern is that it is often untreated. An interesting perspective in terms of our societal situation is presented by Perlmutter and Villaldo in their book, these authors suggest that there's an inflammatory existence going on in this negative thinking, and that leads actually to changes in the brain, negative brain function. These are actually chemical changes that they're finding in the brain from people who they've studied who have this negative thinking or perception. And so it's important to just think about all the messages that we get surrounded every day that tend to be negative, and all you have to do is many times listen to the news to realize that, right? Another perspective is called global angst, and this is by Carl Strenger. He talks about the phenomenon of global angst as unstable self-esteem in our people lead to an unstable society. And so this, he suggests, has something to do with the situation of people thinking negatively and, of course, falling into depression. Whoops. So when we really look at chronicity and chronic illnesses, so often depression accompanies them. We can also look at medical conditions, and often depression accompanies medical conditions. So we say that depression may be secondary to some of the illnesses, or it may be primary. So the illness, a chronic condition, might have been there to start with, and then the depression develops. Or there might have been depression first, and then medical conditions result. There are a variety of medical conditions that coexist and go hand in hand with depression. And these are just a few of them, like Parkinson's, Huntington's, Alzheimer's dementia, cerebrovascular accidents, hypo or hyperthyroidism, metabolic imbalances, multiple sclerosis. But we also know today that there are other causes like elevated stress hormones, what's happening to cortisol levels, low vitamin D levels. There's a lot coming out in vitamin D now in terms of its effect on our body, and that it's not really a vitamin, it functions more as a hormone. Also, the vitamin B's deficiency, niacin and folate deficiencies are also related to depression. And there's some literature that says exposure to plastics. If you've heard of BPA, it's a plastic many times found in food containers, and concern about that having some toxic effects. So there's a concern that these cascading symptoms that can occur can lead to compromised immune systems, which lead to inflammation, which lead to disease. So there seems to be some interesting connections between the inflammatory process and depression. We also know that elderly take many medications and various medications. And we know that medications can induce depression. Some of these are analgesics, antihypertensives, the cardiovascular meds, anti-Parkinson's, steroids, and sedatives. So what really is depression like? For some of you, you may be able to imagine this, and for others, it might be unimaginable. It's sometimes difficult to grasp onto the experience of depression. All of us have had the blues, but what is it like when it becomes quite extreme? I'd like to just read from Styron's book, which is called Darkness Visible, a Memoir of Madness. And he describes depression as follows. Depression is so mysteriously painful and elusive and incomprehensible to those who have not experienced its extreme mood. The blues which people go through are of such prevalence that they may give many of us a hint of the illness in its catastrophic form. The pain of severe depression is unimaginable and kills in many instances because its anguish can no longer be borne. So again, what is depression? It's part of a continuum, a wide continuum of disorders that are often referred to as mood disorders. But it's also just the blues, those sadness experiences that we all have had. In fact, it's quite universal. Nobody is immune to the blues. Everybody feels something, some sadness at some time and another. So it's really a wide spectrum here of just a feeling as well as a disorder. So you can see the complexity of this as we think about the range of experiences that accompany depression. Just to introduce you that there is a geriatric depression scale. This is fairly readily available on internet. And so it's specifically designed for older people to assess depression. I encourage you to find it. It's been used on healthy elderly people, medically ill elderly, as well as those with mild and moderate cognitive impairment. You can use the short form or the long form. It's fairly easy to use. So